Just so you guys know, I got my notes, little notes here if I might refer them from time to time. So, Lindsay, thank you for being here. I want to start with you. And I guess let's just start with a lot of people. Who here knows who Lindsay Scannapieco is? You right? Okay. Awesome. Right. So, given that answer, just if you could start, just give me like the Cliff Notes version of where you came from, what you're up to now, or bring it up to the present, and we'll talk about the project that you're working on right now.
Sure. So my name is Lindsay Scannapieco. I'm from Philadelphia. I was born here in the city. My background is in both real estate finance, and then I did my master's degree in city design and social science. And my focus really became on how to activate, program underutilized assets, vacant spaces, in ways that were socially inclusive, physically enhancing, and economically viable. And so have been kind of working in that in a variety of guises, from very temporal to more permanent projects, and am currently working on a permanent project here in Philadelphia, which is the Bach Building in South Philadelphia. If you're unfamiliar with the Bach Building, it was previously a vocational high school. It was built in 1936 as part of the Public Works Administration. It's an incredible building. It was built to accommodate 3,000 students. It was a place where trades such as plumbing, carpentry, culinary arts, cosmetology were taught, auto mechanics. And unfortunately, for some reason, the school district decided to close it in 2013. This was part of 32 schools that they closed here in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, though, school closure is not just a Philadelphia problem. In Chicago, they closed over 60 schools. In Detroit, they closed over 150 schools. And so the question of what you do with a building that has a social responsibility, I think just from its physical, well, usually typically the building itself is quite grand, as a civic building is, but they're also located in the heart of a neighborhood. They have extremely thick construction and walls, and how do you, what do you do with that? And so our approach was about trying to find value in what already existed. So we knew that there were shops, and we said, okay, well, somebody could probably use that. If a classroom has a sink, that could probably be used by somebody exactly how it is today. Well, maybe with a little bit of paint, maybe with some, maybe with the floor finished, but generally, actually, how could it be used today? And today we have 123 different tenants inside of Bach. We have a woodworker using the old wood shop. We have a catering company using the old culinary arts kitchen. We have a hairdressing salon. We have a daycare. We have a tattoo parlor. We have jewelry designers, glass blowers, a boxing gym, ceramic artists, screen printers, traditional paint-based artists, nonprofits, ESL classes, work-ready programs, Cambodian nonprofit, and we have a bar.
Yeah. Who's been to the Bach Bar here? Went last week or 2 weeks ago for the opening.
And so we have been working to lovingly restore and care for the spaces within the building. Our approach is very much about taking what's there. So if you need a small space, we find a small classroom. If you need a big space, we find a big classroom. And if there isn't a classroom that fits, then we'll let you know when one comes available that does. It's a phased project. It's an iterative project. It's been a project where we've tested and tried and changed and adapted. It has a plan, but not perhaps a master plan. I like to say that I heard Theaster Gates, who's a practitioner, has deeply influenced me, say to take the master out of master plan, and I think that's an important thing in development, is to actually allow for flexibility and openness to see actually what the market or people or ideas might actually just come up in response to the space that I'm certainly not brilliant enough to think of. And so that is kind of the overarching introduction on Bach and what I'm currently working on.
Awesome, awesome. So what I really like about this development, it's not your typical large-scale commercial development. Like you said, it's phased. And so I want you to walk us through a little bit about timing, like how long have you been in the project? When were you? Give us the steps, because you bought it from the city of Philadelphia, which is a huge accomplishment in itself. So I wanted you to just walk us through like how you identified why or how you identified the need in the neighborhood, what the due diligence process looked like, and then take us through the first, maybe up to the first phase of the rehab where you, I mean, maybe up to where you finished the bar and whatnot. It's very interesting to hear this because it's not your typical like buy the building, gut the whole thing, rehab the whole thing, you tenant the property out and then you refi and you're done. It was a little bit different than that.
Yeah. So I was sent the website phlschoolsales.com, which is a pretty sad website, to be honest. Yeah. But I saw Bach. I knew Bach. My family was from South Philly. One of my dad's cousins went to Bach. So I was familiar with it to some degree, but tangentially. And so, to be honest, I submitted for it just kind of on the understanding of what vocational education is. I mean, I personally believe we need more vocational education here in this country, but also how can people use those spaces, those training spaces, those workshop spaces, those making spaces. And that can be a clean user, like an architect practice, or it can be a woodworker. And so we submitted an idea, and to be honest, I think it was a much larger project than I was personally interested in taking on at the time. But I kind of thought, well, I'll learn something. So I submitted a bid. And so the first step of any project is just having the guts to jump in, because you cannot see how deep the waters are and you have no idea where they're going to take you. So. And
how much was your bid for on this?
So I bid the asking price, because I thought that seemed like a pretty level-headed place to start. So I bid $2.1 million for the property. It's a 340,000 square foot building. So that's around $5 a square foot. I then found out, well, I got shortlisted. I had no idea how many people got shortlisted. I still to this day do not know who the other shortlisted parties were. I believe 2 of them were for condo conversions, which is a very typical renovation of a school. And then I got a call that we had been selected, and then I found out that I was the highest bidder, and I said, oh shit.
Like, whoa. That doesn't happen very often.
I said, oh my God, everybody is older and smarter than me. There must be something that I do not know.
So why did you bid the asking price? Like, did you figure out, do you have a rough idea of what your construction costs were going to be when you came up with that number?
So to be honest, at that point, I didn't know a ton. I just thought that $5 a square foot, it was operational in 2013. I said, okay, it's got to work to some degree. Not everything's going to work. Some things are going to need a lot of money. There's going to be lots of surprises in the walls and in the pipes. But hopefully they aren't so bad. If kids were there just a couple years ago.
I wouldn't make that assumption. I saw Sun a couple weeks ago, and
it's probably, yeah, very true. And so, to be honest, I was really nervous. I said to myself, oh God, there's got to be something wrong. And so actually, one of the first times I went into the building, I brought this whole crew. It was like an army of experienced old men with me, where I said, you know, can you identify everything and anything that you see as wrong? So we had, you know, the structural engineer, the historic consultant, the MEP, people who had done kind of projects like this. And to be honest, there were some things that we identified early on as challenges, but we said, I just think most people were scared of the size. It was a very big project. And so I didn't see anything enough to scare me, for better or for worse. And so worked on closing on the building. I think due diligence, I think we thought would take us 3 months. It took us 6, so just know that everything always takes you longer than you think it's going to take you. And when we closed on the property, which was just almost 3 years ago, next month will be 3 years of owning the property. One of the things that was really important for me was to move quickly. I think a lot of developers sit on property for a very long time while they develop grand plans, get all the money together, get all the permits, figure it all out. And I wanted to do something quick to show that, A, even though I was a young female, I could still get things done, and wanted to also... I said, you know, the people who come to your civic association meetings on a 7 p.m. aren't a great reflection of your community. That's a certain type of person who is able to do that in their schedule. What's the best way to get to know your neighbors? The best way I got to know my own personal neighbors on my block was having drinks on the stoop. So we said, let's invite people in for a drink. And that was as basic as an idea as it started out with. Let's just invite people up for a drink. And so I came up with this idea that we would open a bar on the roof as the first thing. I wonder every day whether or not it was the right or worst first move out the door.
Well, it's working out.
We opened a bar within less than 30 days of owning the building. My team, we built it ourselves. We sanded, painted, drilled, the whole works.
How much do you think you spent on your bar rehab?
I spent pretty much all the money that I had because the plumbing bill was the biggest. It probably came into probably $100,000 all in. I think about 80 of that was for plumbing.
And you did that in 30 days?
Did that in 30 days.
It's a big deal. I don't hear of a lot of people buying buildings that are how big? How much square footage? 200 something thousand?
340,000.
340,000 and going in themselves and putting sweat equity in. Has anybody ever heard of that before? And so tell us a little about the bar. I know you told me some numbers the first 30 days or so. I mean, that's...
So everybody told me it wouldn't work. They said, you're near Passyunk Avenue, but you're next to nothing. You're in a residential neighborhood. Who's going to come? How are you advertising? We didn't have any money left to do advertising, so that wasn't really an option. My own father told me it wouldn't work. He told me to build 2 walls that when I had 50 friends show up, it would feel busy. Wow. And we only opened for 22 nights. I used basically the same permit system that all the beer gardens around town use.
Is he here, by the way?
Yeah, he is. He's in the second row.
Okay. Awesome.
And over 22 nights, I had 30,000 people show up. And my biggest issue became how to deal with the fact that I had a line out the door and it looked like I was opening a nightclub instead of a commercial office space or mixed-use space. That was my big new problem. But the great news was that allowed me to gain confidence in banks. It allowed me to close on my first loan. It allowed me to actually do my marketing for my first tenants. It allowed my neighbors to get to know me. And so very shortly after that, we started to get people saying, how can I actually rent space downstairs? And so today, like I said, we have 123 businesses, 75% of which are residents of South Philadelphia. We have about 15% are nonprofits. And it's an incredible variety of people. 50% of our tenants are moving from their living room, so it's about kind of investing in people who are really just starting out, taking that first big jump. But to be honest, we're all taking it together. And that's one of the things that I think really has made it work.
That's great. So most of your spaces, I know we were talking about how you started to touch on it for a second. What percentage of a lot of this building, a lot of it you're keeping as much as possible? Do you have like a rough ballpark about some of the like in some of the classrooms, the plumbing and all that? I know some of the spaces you have, what are they called? Dirty spaces for the. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. But so you're keeping as much as possible here. Like, what do you think? How are you thinking really far in advance about? All right, how am I going to rehab this, or am I waiting for a tenant that comes and we'll just see and put them in whatever space makes sense, or like, and give us a little bit of idea about, because I'm sure the financing is probably a little bit different with this. Like you're getting different loans. If you pull one major loan, do you have to refinance out of that to do the next step, or what happens?
So I think there's positives and negatives of kind of jumping in feet first. One of the challenges has been then how do you finance it gradually over time. And so I was very lucky in that I had a bank that gave me my construction loan. I'm still working on closing the additional funding that's required to finish out the project. Overall, it's about a $21 million project. Most of our money goes into things that you can't see, which is very unfortunate. But we spend a lot of money on plumbing and making sure, in the heating system, to be honest, old boiler from way back when. But the reality is that if we spend a lot of money fixing up the space, and then I have that debt, I have to charge a certain rent in order for that to work. And I think to support nonprofits, community services, entrepreneurs, local businesses, artists, they all need affordable rents. And so our whole thing is, let's make sure this is functional. It doesn't have to be polished, but it has to be cared for. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be intentional. And so it has to work, it has to function, it has to be usable space. And for some people, a usable space, I have a woodworker who said, oh my gosh, I didn't have heat in my last building. I said, you what? We're in Philadelphia. But, for a lot of people, it's actually about, making sure that the investment you put in is something that actually you can carry with what you're looking to bring in to then pay back those those costs.
So what would you say your rent, I know your rent's got to be affordable. What do you think it is roughly per square foot versus what some other spaces in the market down there might be? Just in case anyone's looking for space right now in South Philly.
So we're around $1.25 a square foot, but it depends. For bigger fit outs, we're probably higher than that. But we also tend to, we try to actually, one of the challenges has been that a lot of our tenants, because this is the first time that they're seeing a lease, they don't know all of the intricacies of a lease. And so we usually will, we charge a flat number rate that will include utilities, it will include CAM cost, it will include maybe variable expenses, because when you're starting a small business, you just need to know how much you want to spend a month. For big users, it's a bit different, but that's kind of our baseline for a very basic space.
Okay, cool. So what do you think your greatest challenge has been to date in the 3 years? You've already spoken of a couple, but with the building. And then tell me a little bit more about where do you see it going in the next, because how many, you have 100-something tenants, you're not even close to capacity though. So, and by the way, I also want you to touch on, there's 2 very special spaces opening in the building, one this month, one in the near future. Tell us a little bit about that. What's coming? What's to come down the line?
So we're about 50% of the way there. So we have another 50% to go, which is actually a lot when you think about it. It's around 100,000 square feet of leasable space. We're not done. We have a coffee shop opening tomorrow. So go check out Two Persons Coffee on the first floor. And we have a restaurant opening up on the 8th floor, hopefully later this month. We have a butcher shop from Reading Terminal Market that's opening up their second location on the first floor, and a barbecue restaurant associated with that called South Philly Smokehouse that's also opening this summer. So those are all things kind of that are very public facing coming online. I think one of the biggest challenges though has been by making our first step out a very public hospitality focused use. For better or for worse, people know the building for the bar. People do want to go wander and see the tenants, but a lot of people are just working and they don't want to be disrupted by people looking in and checking out what they're doing. And so one of our biggest challenges has been trying to communicate now that we're more than just a bar. And so, the bar takes up under 5% of the building's square footage. It's also, basically the way it works is it's almost a subsidy to the building that actually allows us to support the building. So I think that's been a real challenge for us, but we're starting, I think as the building starts to open up in other ways, right now the bar is the only thing that's really publicly open. But as a coffee shop or a restaurant or the boxing gym or the family chiropractor office, all of those, as people start to come in the door more frequently, they'll start to hopefully better understand the wide range of incredible people who are in the building.
Okay, very cool. So I guess I'll wrap it up with everything that you know right now. If someone were out here in the audience and they're working on residential developments right now and they want to, let's say they have someone with money behind them or they're finding opportunities like this, what would you tell them? What would be your greatest piece of advice, maybe a pitfall to avoid or something that you thought was going to be one way or was going to be another way about this whole development process?
So I think that once you buy a property, it's kind of like a play. The show must go on. And so I think there's a lot of unexpected twists and turns. And so you will never be able to know everything that you think is going to be your problem won't be your problem. Everything that you think will be easy won't be easy. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to adjust. And also just be open to suggestions. I think the hair salon is one of my favorite stories because I always had the banks asking me, like, can you do a map and show me where everybody's going to be in the building? And I was like, I have no idea where people are going to be in the building. But they don't like to hear that. So, I had to say, well, it's going to be these types of people. And a hairdressing salon came to me and said, we've been on East Passyunk Avenue. Rents are going up. We want to stay in this neighborhood. We want to grow in this neighborhood. Can we be on the 5th floor? And I said, the 5th floor? How's that going to work? And I said, aren't hairdressing salons always on the 1st floor of a building? And they said, nobody gets their hair done because they passed it on the street. They get their hair done because they see somebody who has great hair and they say, I love your hair, where'd you get it done? And I was like, oh, right, that totally makes sense. And they're doing great on the 5th floor. But I think just being open to how people might use spaces in ways that you just can't maybe see, or non-traditional ways, and being open. And we always say, saying yes where it's easy and saying no where it's really hard. But being aware of your capacity and resources is something that we're still working on every day, but being open to it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to Aaron. Hope you guys like that. Great. Oh my God, there's so many people here right now. All right, Aaron, we got a lot of things we could talk about. So start with who here has heard of MN Partners before, seen any of their projects? Great. I like the hands. I like the excited hands in the back. Thank you, guys. So tell us a little about yourself. Let's give us a Cliff Notes version. I know you've been in the development business for a little while. Tell us a little bit how you got in, where you started, and what kind of projects you guys are working on today.
Sure. So, Aaron Smith, MN Partners. And
keep the mic close too.
I got involved in real estate when I was younger. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I hated school, did okay, but I made sure that every summer, every time I had any second to myself, I was doing some kind of internship. And I was talking to some people earlier who were asking sort of the same question of how do I get involved? And honestly, I interned one summer. The internship turned into what is now my career. I had done internships in music, in real estate, at the World Affairs Council. So anything that I found to be interesting, I wanted to see how the sausage was made, basically. So real estate presented itself in 2005. Graduated in 2008, and at the time wasn't really a great time for someone with no money to get involved in real estate. So that's what I did. And my business partner, who was actually the guy who I ended up interning for 14 years ago, he was involved in Brewerytown in 2001. So there was one major player up there. His name is John Westrom. You probably see his stuff all over the city at this point. But he was going pretty heavy in Brewerytown, and he took one approach to development. And Dave and I sort of took a different approach, and it was starting small. And literally, single-family homes, 2-unit buildings, commercial on the ground floor, residential up top, very, very small. And it was an idea that the community we were entering into was clearly defined by most of Philadelphia as being something. And it wasn't true, but you had that perception, and as you know, perception's reality, and it dictated where the neighborhood was going. So if you're familiar sort of with that neighborhood, it's bounded by Girard College on one end, the Philadelphia Zoo on the other, you have Fairmount to the south, and then you had Brewerytown to the north. And you had this great commercial corridor that I think the last long-running business was Young's Candy, if you've heard of Young's Candy. They used to have lines around the block back Christmas, Thanksgiving. I mean, it was the place to go in the neighborhood. But it went out of business shortly before we sort of opened an office up there. And this isn't groundbreaking, this isn't shocking. You look at the history of even Center City, Philadelphia. The city grows from its core. So we saw a commercial corridor that had plenty of vacant spaces. We were fortunate enough that the neighborhood had a master plan done in the early 2000s where literally the CDC went door to door and said, what do you want in your neighborhood? And it's funny because 20 years later, people are like, well, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And literally, it was a game plan, and it was right there in front of us. So opened up the office in 2008. Sort of went all in. I coached Little League 5 nights a week for probably 4 summers up there. Really had the desire that if I was going to be walking the neighborhood, if I was going to be building, if I was going to be investing money, if I was going to be making money in a neighborhood, I grew up in Center City, Philadelphia, so that was always my experience, was be involved and don't just show up and leave and just sort of dictate that growth on your own. There are needs of a community, and I think you were talking about that earlier. I mean, you've got these needs, and they're not crazy. I mean, supermarket, pharmacy, coffee shop. I mean, you have standard amenities that, if you were in northern Fairmount or the south end of Brewerytown, you were leaving your community to go spend your money. So if you needed toilet paper, cereal, milk, it didn't matter. You were leaving West Girard Avenue. So, at the time we said, okay, a well-defined commercial corridor, you build that corridor up, and you sort of watch the neighborhood grow around that. We struggled at first because we thought we were kind of insane as well. We saw Fishtown, Point Breeze, Francisville, every other neighborhood was talked about at the time, and no one mentioned Brewerytown. But for us, that wasn't a negative. It sort of allowed for a very slow growth of a neighborhood, which I think has sort of reversed itself in the last few years in a lot of neighborhoods in Philadelphia. But long story short was, sort of an investment in the commercial corridor and acquiring single-family homes, multi-unit buildings, 2-3 units, sort of around that corridor, and crossing our fingers and kind of the same approach, hoping we weren't insane and one day that this was going to sort of pick up. So.
And now, just to give you guys some perspective, I know you guys have got about how many projects you're working on right now? In process between?
So in the pipeline, and our sort of niche at this point is the adaptive reuse project. So we finished the Pyramid Lofts.
Yep.
It's at 31st and Glenwood, 50 apartments, 5,000 square feet of commercial, office, retail space. So Pyramid Lofts we wrapped up last year, refinanced, stabilized.
Sure. If you had to add up the square footages between like Red Bell, St. Joe's, all that, talking.
My math is horrible, and actually one of the guys I'm here with tonight is the math guy. So I'll. Pyramid was 67,000 square feet. We're working on the old St. Joe's Hospital at 17th and Girard. It's about 167,000 square feet, and I'd say we're about 30% done that project. And then we acquired the Red Bell Brewery. It's across the street from the Pyramid Lofts. It's a brewery that's sat vacant since 1998, right around, and that's about 227,000 square feet. And then we sort of have a different wing of the business, which is the value add. So we've moved into West Philadelphia, sort of into Drexel's campus, and have taken, I'll say, problem buildings where students were living, paying very high rents for sort of a low-grade product. Doing our due diligence, making sure that we could go into these products and sort of effectuate a nice little aesthetic change. And there are about 130 units in West Philly right now.
So that's a lot. If you guys were doing your math right there, it's about 500,000 square feet of space right there. 67, 1 or something. I know St. Joe's, you can add more square feet in the future. So What I want to do is, I'll pick one of them. I'm going to pick Red Bell out of here, and I want to just have you walk us through that a little bit, because there's a couple things I want you guys to take notes on, which is tax credits, historic tax credits, and then we're going to talk about the Keystone Opportunity Zone. I hope touch on that a little bit, and then how you guys are going to reuse that space, some of the things you're going to be able to keep. So the Red Bell, it's 220 something thousand square feet.
227 around that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're in the planning processes right now. So. A lot of your projects, how many projects have you had the historic tax credits on so far? A couple?
I think we're now working on our fourth.
Okay. Has anyone here heard about what historic tax credits are? Anybody? Thank you, Tracy, for raising your hand. You're the only one. So give us a little, how does that make what is it, and then how is it making some of your projects feasible?
So historic tax credits, it's kind of like free money to some degree. You have to like being tortured. You have to like not moving as quickly as you'd like to move. And it sort of falls in line with doing projects that the buildings once housed some sort of different use, right? So a brewery, electrical supply company. But you're finding buildings that are unique. And buildings that maybe some people would come and say, well, I love the square footage of the land. I'd like the land here, but I hate the building. To us, we like a unique property. So historic tax credits, it's really boring. I'll try and make it as quick as possible. So it's a 3-part process. You identify a structure. You identify it as one that you want to get on the registry of being you're basically saying, okay, this is a historic building. And I want to utilize it. So once the Secretary of the Interior has said, okay, we agree with you in the Part 1. This is a historic structure. You go through the Part 2 phase. And the Part 2 phase is saying, okay, we want to do this work. Here's the supporting evidence of what the building used to look like. This is what we want to do to bring it back to the way it looked. And you're dealing with a few different organizations who are basically dictating how you are going to renovate the exterior of the building and make sure that you are not turning it into a spaceship using all sorts of materials, vinyl, hardy, Core-10, whatever it may be, that you are bringing this building back to where it needs to be. The benefit of the historic tax credit is you can get up to 20% of your total, what they call QRE, your qualified rehab expenditures. So if you have $10 million worth of construction costs for that building, for the building itself, and it's not really landscaping, it's not really anything outside the building, but it does have to do with all of the systems, all of the structures of the building, you can get 20% of that total construction dollar amount basically given to you by the state. And real estate is a very cash-intensive business, as I'm sure you have all seen, right? So last thing I say about the historic tax credits, the reason why we do it is if you've identified that there's $30 million of work that needs to be done on the building, you get 20% of that as tax credits. You agree on the amount. And essentially, you have companies like PNC who will come in day one, and before the budget was changed on the national level, you could sell these credits for 90 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar, you could sell it off day one for 90 cents of that dollar. So it's now been reduced to around 81 to 83. But on a project that costs you $10 million or $30 million, if you're spending $30 million and day one you can sell these tax credits off, you've been approved, and you can take in $5.5 million that can come in day one and go directly into the building, it's huge. One of the challenges is you count that as equity in your deal. So you need to work with a bank who understands that this equity is actually real, it's coming, it exists. This isn't some foreign thing that no one's ever done before. But there's nothing better than being able to keep a structure because you have at least 4 different organizations who are helping you to get this money to put it directly back into the project.
That's a huge deal. So did everybody catch that? If you're doing a $30 million rehab and you can work out a deal, you get the buildings qualified and all that, you get $5.5 million that you can cash out up front. I mean, does that cover most of your, I'm not sure what the financing terms looked at. Let's say, you use it on Pyramid?
Pyramid, yep.
So if you need, I'm not sure how much they're asking, the bank's 20, 25, 30% up front, and you can cash out 20, let's say 15, 18%, that helps the financing a lot, right?
Absolutely.
Huge deal.
It helps even more so when you're closing on that building with a construction loan, with your initial loan. A lot of times you have to sort of find creative ways to finance things. So it's very helpful when you sort of go through the typical closing process.
Okay. And you guys are doing this on your project Red Bell right now?
We did it at 17th and Fairmount. We did it at, we used them at the Pyramid Lofts, and we're using them at Red Bell as well. We got through the Part 1. We added it to the state registers as a historic building. And we're now working on the Part 2, which on 220-some thousand square feet of space, there's a lot of back and forth between yourself, the architect, and sort of the powers to be that tell you how to renovate.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about then, what is Red Bell, what's your vision for Red Bell, right? Mixed use, what kind of spaces you imagine being there, and then I really want you to touch on the Keystone Opportunity Zone. Does anybody know what that means, Keystone Opportunity Zone? Great. This project is something really special about it, and I think it's going to attract a lot of businesses, so.
So I think the first thing to talk about is, I'm sure one of the reasons you found Bach to be so appealing is the aesthetic of the building, but really the build. If you go around the small neighborhoods of Philadelphia and you see how people build, and I'm guilty of it as well, I built single-family homes for a while, and I understand why you build a certain way, but you can't replicate these buildings. You find an asset that you're buying for $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, but it would take you $40 million to build. It doesn't always mean jump, feet first into that project, but you have the confidence in your neighborhood, in your plan and what you're trying to do. Then not a bad idea. But in terms of Red Bell, it'll be mixed use. There'll be over 100 apartments in there and 20,000 square feet of commercial. One of the reasons why I like these buildings, you've got literally 14 to 16 inches of concrete between you and your neighbor above and below. So, one of the main complaints of living in a densely populated city, and when you're living in new construction, a lot of the times is like
Yep.
or maybe there's a small dog that lives above you and it never stops.
I got one right above me right now. It's not cool.
So I think the quality of build is something that's really attractive. The story. I think, and I hate using the phrase millennials because I fall into that category, but I think the story of where you live is becoming very important. You see everything is cyclical, and right now we see not just people moving into the city and baby boomers once their kids are gone moving into the city, but Philadelphia has turned into a very, very young city. Growing up here in the 80s and 90s certainly did not feel that way. But I think when you have a building that once housed a brewery or something that just has some sort of unique key feature to it, it helps you to sell that product, and people seem to want to live there. So, again, apartments, commercial. We've got some ideas for the commercial. I think it'll hopefully all fall together, much like the Bach building.
Sure.
Which, by the way, I feel like there's no better way to get your start in a building like that than to open a bar and to make it a hip, cool place because, hey, I love going there to drink. I love going there to eat. I'm a woodworker. I'd love to work right below this thing. And maybe 22 times a year, as soon as I'm done this on the first year, I'm going right upstairs afterwards, and I'm going to spend my entire day at this place, which is kind of the point of what the city is supposed to offer. And when you're fortunate enough to have a large-scale building like this, you want to offer as many amenities as physically possible. So if people can spend their day drinking beer, coffee, practicing yoga, going to a gym, and it's all in their building, and you're in a building that's in an ancillary neighborhood, so you're not charging Center City rents. Things are cyclical, as much as we want to believe that things are always going to sort of go up. I got into this in 07, 08, so in my mind, the sky is sort of always falling. So you want to plan ahead. You want to offer people a product that they would see in core Center City, but outside of that neighborhood, and that way more people can afford it. I think your tenancy is much larger than who can afford core Center City.
Cool. All right, I'm getting the nod from Mike, so I'll wrap it up with everything. I know you've got a lot of experience. If someone's out here and they want it, let's say they find a big deal like that, they don't have the money for it, and they think, all right, hey, I want to tackle this. What do you think they should do? What advice would you give them? Say that in the mic.
No, my
He
advice
said
is
pray.
my advice is to start small. I literally had no experience in real estate, in construction, anything when I first got into it, and I watched through some interesting years. Things do well, things do not so well. And my goal was always to sort of keep my eyes and my ears open. So around 4 or 5 years into real estate, I decided the only way I was truly going to learn was to be a GC myself and to build. So one of the beautiful things about building is you have a lot of people watching over you. So if you're going ground up, you've got special inspections. You have all sorts of things that are protecting you. Find a mentor, find someone who's done it before, start small, learn how to do it yourself, learn every aspect of these buildings, from the foundation to the slab to the roofing structure. Why talk to your subcontractors? Subcontractors love to talk. So if you ask them a question, and it's very simple, you'll be amazed at how long someone will be able to talk to you about the theories of roofing and framing and plumbing and anything else. So start small, find a mentor. People generally like to tell you about their experiences, especially in real estate. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. I appreciate it. These guys will be available for questions afterwards. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to take a 2-minute interlude. A 2-minute interlude.
Beneficial because we need you. So let's get together and figure this out and let's build. And that's exactly what we did. And we actually partnered with them on a second deal. We built a community shopping center at 7th and Lehigh. So we forged a great relationship, and they realized that we brought something of value to them.
So outside of having the deal, because I think this is going to be very, very helpful for a lot of people, and partnerships is how I bought all my properties too. Why do you think they chose to partner with you? Like, what did they see in you, or what? Because I'm sure they brought most of the funding for that first deal.
Yes,
so,
they did. Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people out here, they're looking at projects like this, and you don't always have all the money. So what do you need to show a partner like that? I mean, is it just as simple as, hey, we locked up the RFP, these are the numbers, and we're going to help manage it, and that's it, or?
Well, it depends. In that particular circumstance, it was the location and that we had won the RFP.
Okay.
In the situation with the community shopping center, we had negotiated the site control. That was an old school. That was a circumstance, unfortunately, that it really was in such a challenged area that there was no adaptive reuse for that building. It was 400,000 square feet. It sat at 7th and Lehigh, and if anybody knows that area, it is very, very impoverished. So unless it was a government institution or something of that size to come in, and they weren't coming to 7th and Lehigh, we had to come up with a different solution. So in that circumstance, we actually tore down the building, but kept the annex building. But what we found is that it was a food desert. There was no quality food. Everyone was going to the bodegas and the corner stores, and they're overspending, and they're not getting quality. So we brought a supermarket. Now, we brought a Save-A-Lot, right? But what we did, we demanded that they do something better than they usually have. Because a lot of people will say, Save-A-Lot, right? That's the first reaction that I would probably get. But it was the first Save-A-Lot that had a fresh butcher in their store. It was the first Save-A-Lot that had an enlarged fresh produce area. So it's required that you push the envelope. We didn't want it to be just an old Save-A-Lot, because I wanted more for that neighborhood. I wanted more for, and I'm looking at it always as my people. So that's how we look at every project that we do.
Very interesting. What was that project size, the second shopping center?
The community shopping center was $13 million.
Okay, so you have a $20 million project followed by a $13 million project. Were either one of these constructed stick-built or modular?
Yes. Actually, our first project was constructed modularly, and I don't know does anyone know what modular construction is? It's really almost like building with Legos. We literally had boxes that were constructed off-site. Most of them are in middle Pennsylvania, where they have just a lot of land and space to do that. They ship them in, and they literally stack them on top of each other and connect them on site. At that time, it was the largest modularly constructed building in the city of Philadelphia. It's 128,000 square feet.
Wow.
And it really is an amazing process to watch. It was kind of funny story real quickly. It was a student housing building, and everyone knows all the students have to move in August. That's kind of the flow of time. And we started construction in September, and we were trying to pre-lease. And they're like, we're not signing a lease. There's no building. What are you talking about? You're not ever going to be open by August. We're like, yes, we are. So come April, one day there was nothing there, and 3 weeks later the whole superstructure was up. And people are like, what the? And literally we leased out between the end of April and August, because no one before that believed. So of course we were sweating. We were like, oh my God, we're not gonna have any leases this first year. It's gonna take us extra time to stabilize. But once the superstructure was up, we were able to lease.
So you started and completed that project in how many months?
In 9 months.
In 9 months.
9 months.
Has anyone ever heard of a $20 million project being done in 9 months?
9 months, yeah.
outside of the obvious, I mean, you're saving tons of time, and I'm guessing construction risk. Like, why? Hearing that, I don't hear about a ton of modular construction in the city. I've seen some big projects. Why do you think more people don't do it? Like, what other benefits? Are there risks? Is the construction quality not?
No, the quality is great. I think people have seen it what it was in the past, and it just kind of came off as kind of cheap and just looked very bland. But it is evolving, and what you get is actually very good quality because everything that's being constructed is in a controlled environment. You're not dealing with the elements, you're not dealing with inconsistencies. It's almost like, building a car. It's very systematic, it's very controlled. So the quality is fantastic, actually.
And this was at 10th and Diamond,
10th
right?
and Diamond.
10th and Diamond, Wow. Okay, now did you get any credits on that project?
Not on that project.
Okay.
That was your more traditional project where you just had debt and equity on the project. Now, the community shopping center was layered with all kinds of subsidies. We had HUD 108, we had Brownsfield grant, we had new market tax credits, we had a state low interest loan. Because to get these tenants to come, we had to provide them really with some lower rents to encourage them and to mitigate their risk. The first thing that tenants say is, we're gonna have shrinkage. We're gonna have break-ins, we're gonna have issues. So we need to be able to not have rents that are so high that we can absorb some of the issues that come. And there are issues, and there have been issues, but it's better. And now that that shopping center is there, you start to see the kind of the swell of improvements that starts to happen in and around, because now we've eliminated the blight that was there.
Okay. So for maybe half of the audience, when you were talking about those different credits, if you're sitting there like, what is she talking about? Where do you go to learn about new market tax credits, different types of subsidies? Like, how's the average person going to go find out?
That's a good question. I was lucky enough that when I was at my prior job, I was exposed to it. But for those that aren't, I really have to put a shout out to PIDC and TRF. They really will help answer questions. They run workshops. They are really two very critical entities in the city. Both the community shopping center, our Eastern Lofts project at 30th and Cecil B. Moore, the project we're working on now in Wayne Junction, PIDC has played an integral role. We have received new market tax credit allocations from them on each of those projects.
Awesome. So I'm going to give you guys a little point of reference here. Eastern Lofts, she did a project 30th and Cecil B, you said? 37 units, commercial space. Total construction cost roughly $8 million?
Yes.
Okay. Of that $8 million between the new market tax credits and the historical tax credits, how much of that was funded with free money?
Combined, about $4 million out of the 8. $4 million out of the 8. So what's really wonderful about that is after the 7-year term for the new markets, because you do have to stand still, you can't refinance, you can't sell, you can't do any of that. But after those 7 years, we're going to be, we only have a $3 million loan on that project. And the value, Lord willing, because it's looking good, will probably be around 9 to 9.5. So the end is really where the kicker is at that point, because the new market tax credits, they burn off and you only have the debt that's left to handle. So
that's amazing.
But you need that, because at 30th and Cecil B. Moore, just not to interrupt you, we're in Strawberry Mansion, okay? Okay. We're not in Brewerytown. We push the envelope. And honestly, I must say, M&M Partners, we helped y'all out at Pyramid Lofts, okay?
Right down the street.
We pushed the edge. We pushed the edge. And you know what? We pushed the edge because my partner and I, we have a 23-year-old, a 25-year-old, and we said, where would we want our kids to live? Because honestly, our kids can't afford to live in Center City. I'm not footing that bill. I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing it. So we wanted the people that were going to live there to have the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances and the funky layout with the concrete floor and the big windows and the vaulted ceilings. And we wanted to be able to provide that, and we did. And we're really excited that we've created, I think, a great community for young people. And I'll be honest, 80% of them look like me. And I'm damn proud of it, to be honest. So, and there's a resident here sitting there. Hey. And you know what? He was one of the first to move in, and he's still there. He's about to, I just talked to you today. He's like, I'm renewing for a 3rd year. I'm like, hallelujah. All right now.
That's awesome. That's great. So, all right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave a little more time for Q&A for both of you. So thank you, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Allan, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. So, like I mentioned, we're going to leave a little bit of extra time for Q&A for these two. So, who here doesn't know who Allan Domb is? Okay, great. So if you maybe give us a real short Cliff Notes version of where you're from, what you're up to now, what's your, you talk about City Council.
First, I just want to say, listening to everyone, Lindsay and Michael earlier, and Leslie, listening to you now, it's pretty amazing to have entrepreneurs like yourselves in the city of Philadelphia developing neighborhoods. And what I look at is you're expanding the tax-paying base, which is huge for the city, huge. We need more and more people doing this. So I applaud all of you. It's phenomenal, really. And I know you're doing great. I know everyone's doing great things. And I'm going to take a tour of what you're doing. We have that scheduled.
Absolutely.
But I guess I might, if I go by, I'm sitting here and saying to myself, how the heck did I wind up here sitting in this place looking out at the river right now, okay? And because I go back in time and I grew up pretty modestly. Most people don't know this. I grew up in a 4-room apartment in Fort Lee, New Jersey by the George Washington Bridge. Fort Lee became famous from Governor Christie, but before that, it was still a nice place. Anyway, I grew up, I'll try it again, $100 a month, 4 rooms. My brother and I shared a bedroom, 800 square feet, for those of you who know how big that is. It was very modest. Lived there till I was 12 years old. The landlord lived in some town called Lower Merion. Never heard of it?
With him?
Thank you. Anyway, my mother complained we had no hot water for a week. Called the mayor of Fort Lee. We got hot water. A week later, we got an eviction notice. They kicked us out of the apartment because my mother called the mayor. At that time, there's no laws protecting tenants. So we moved to another home. But it was great taste of real estate. My first purchase, I'm 13 years old. By the way, this is how old I'm sitting here saying, should I say this or not? But I had 2 paper routes. I don't even know what newspapers are. I had 2 paper routes when I was 13 and 12, and I saved money, cut lawns, $5 a lawn. At the time, the papers were 50 cents a week for a 7-day subscription. You read that? So anyway, I saved $1,500. My parents were buying a piece of land in Florida for their retirement, they thought. It was $4,000 with like $400 down. I asked the salesman after he met with them if he had any property on the water. I'm 13 years old, and he said it was in Palm Coast, Florida. And he said, yes, we have a property. It's $10,500. I said, what's the finances on that? He said, you have to put $1,000 down and $142.63, but you got to be 21.
Anyway, can you hear me in the back okay? Yeah. Be extra quiet back there, please. Thanks. So I asked my parents to co-sign along. They said, absolutely not. You're 13 years old, you got to go to school. And I asked my grandmother, who lived with us at the time, my grandfather passed away, and she secretly signed the loan for me. My parents went crazy, of course, and my grandmother and me. But she was a great grandmother. And I bought this property on the coast, and I learned a valuable lesson. I worked to pay that payment, by the way. That payment was like more than my parents' rent. Think about that. It's $142.63 a month. So all kinds of jobs, high school and everything. When I was 21 years old, a broker calls me from Palm Coast and says, "Want to sell your lot?" And I said, "Sure. How much is the price?" He said, $25,000. I said, "Sold." Today it's worth almost $500,000. It was on the Intercoastal. So I learned a lesson. Don't sell good real estate. But a few things I just want to share because I've been hearing all kinds of great information. I believe in this old Ben Franklin statement, that is, be more concerned about the return of your money than the return on your money. Think about that. Be more concerned about the return of the principal than the return on the principal. Because so many people go into real estate and lose money. There are people that do lose money in real estate. So I'm very conservative. I didn't start development until I was 20 years in the business. 20 years. So what did I do back in 1980 when interest rates hit 21%? I was buying small little investment properties. But every property I bought had a 15-year mortgage on it. So I forced myself, I had negative cash flow up to my eyeballs. I forced myself to pay down the debt, the principal. But then once I hit 1995, guess what? I had the loan paid off. Now I had this cash coming in, and another one paid off. And I forced myself to develop what I call a cookie cutter formula. I also specialized in one area of real estate. I was a one-street specialist, and that was in Center City and in condominiums specifically. So I had properties paying off. I never spent that money. I always lived on the brokerage money. I was broke, I'm a broker. And so I kept reinvesting the money, reinvesting and reinvesting. And I will say something else. How many people in this room, by the way, are real estate professionals, salespeople or brokers? How many people in this room own investment properties, by a show of hands? How many people in this room own more than 5 investment properties? How many own more than 10? 20? Okay, we got to improve your assets here. So let me say this to you. Those of you who are selling real estate, you make a living selling it. You create wealth owning it. Think about that. You make a living selling it. You create wealth owning it. So I kept buying individual properties, put them on 15-year mortgages. I bought 2 units in Society and Towers. I still have ATE in the South Tower. I paid $27,000. I remember this in 1980. And by the way, I put down at that time you could put down 5%. Even as an investor, I could put down 5% of rent. But the interest rates were 13%. All the rent was a joke, like $350 a month. But today it's probably worth $180. But it's paid off, and that cash flow comes in. I guess my point is, you have to live on substantially less than what you earn. You ever hear the book, The Millionaire Next Door?
Yes.
If those of you who haven't heard of it, you should buy the book and read it. It's all about saving money. I'm a member of the top 300 realtors in the country. Half of them, half of them have no money. They live above their means. They live above their means. You see this suit? It looks it. It's like 18 years old. I still have a 2004 Mini Cooper. I mean, I have another car too, but you got to be very cautious and careful. And I will say this.
Guys in the back, please keep the conversations outside. We're going to be speaking. Just give it some situation.
I think to a large degree, there's 2 things you can buy. And I always categorize it like this. You can buy butter or investments with your money. So what's butter? Things that melt away as soon as you buy them. They go down in value. Cars, I'm going to say vacations and trips, even though that's great to do. Clothes, going out to eat. What's investments? I think it's real estate and savings. And the key to life, to a degree, is the more you allocate to the investments when you're younger, the more butter you can have later. Think about that. That is absolutely true. So today we're on, let me just go to 19, 1999, I did my first development deal. I learned a valuable lesson. I had a partner, Mike DePaulo. Anybody know Mike DePaulo? Okay. So Mike is a special guy and a good friend. But he's my partner in a building called 220 West Washington Square. Anybody know the building? You know where Tallulah's is on Washington Square? Yeah. It's right next door. It's the old Saunders building. W.B. Saunders. And by the way, you know, Washington Square at one point was the publishing capital of the world. Saunders, A&W Air, Curtis Publishing, Lippincott. I buy this building called Saunders with Mike DePaulo. And it's 7 stories, 3,200 square feet per floor. We develop into single floor condos, and we put 2 elevators in, only 7 units. I learned a very valuable lesson. We barely made any money, but the infrastructure for 7 units could have been the same cost as 20 units. And I realized that we had to have 2 elevators, we had to have all the systems. If you're going to do a development deal, that was my first one, you want to develop on a bigger scale than 7 units. So the next building I bought was a building called the Barclay. You may know the Barclay at Rittenhouse Square. But you don't know it when I bought it. Tom, you may remember. It was a dump. It was an Arkley Inquirer. There was no hot water. The elevators weren't working. 30 people lived there. Mrs. Sylvia Mann, who was Fred Mann's wife, Fred Mann from the Music Center, who lived in Barclay, had to be taken to the Rittenhouse Hotel to take her showers. There was no hot water in the building. So I bought 240 empty hotel rooms. And by the way, it was the price at that time, it was 152,000 square feet. The price was $10.7 million.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Talk a little about how you financed.
Yes. I was going to get it. I didn't have the money to buy the building, but I had the real estate assets at that point to leverage those assets, to lend against those assets. It's now 20 years I've been in the business. And remember, in 1995, they started paying off. So I went to Betsy Cohn. Anybody remember Betsy Cohn? Jefferson Bank? Great bank. I miss Jefferson Bank. But I went to Betsy. She said, well, we can tie up your portfolio, all of it, and you can sign personally. And, you know, your personal residence at the time was living at Pier 5. We wouldn't want that too. And I said to myself, that's risky, but you know what? For $10.7 million, I'm buying 152,000 square feet in the Barclay. It's worth it. I'll do it. I'm not going to give up that deal. And I have a personal philosophy that I don't walk away from loans. Even if the deal goes bad, I'll pay it off. I don't want to be the person who walked away from the loan. So I bought the Barclay for $10.7 million. It was a nightmare. In fact, at the closing, the seller, the FBI was there for 7 straight days. The closing was from 9 a.m. until 6 o'clock for 7 straight, 5 days and 2 days the next week. At one point, the FBI said to me, you're not buying the Barclay unless you buy these 6 other properties. I don't even know where they were.
That's better. Thanks. Anyway, so I bought these 6 other properties. But the one was in Mantua. I thought there was South Jersey. It was actually West Philadelphia. I couldn't even go to see the properties. I had to pay another $300,000 for these 6 properties. I had no idea what they were. I finally went to the property in Mantua. And it was a bunch of Drexel students, and they had created on the roof a beach. They actually had sand brought up to the roof, and they have these beach parties on the roof. And when I saw that, I said, "Oh my God, this is a liability nightmare." I meanwhile quickly exited all 6 properties, sold them, and got out. But the Barclay was an interesting building because I had to develop around 30 existing condo owners. Any idea how painful that is? Anybody know anybody who lives in the Barclay? So I'll be careful what I say. It was very, very painful. But it worked out okay. I basically paid, do the math, 152,000 square feet, 10.7 million. What is that, $75 a foot, in that range? And I sold raw space for $200 to $250 a foot. By the way, today, it's worth $800 to $1,000 a foot. So I'm happy that like 35, 40 people who bought from me made over $1 million to $3 million each. God bless them. I did okay. But every sale of the Barclay, every sale, I bought something from the proceeds. I never touched the proceeds. So I bought other real estate every time. So every time I would sell something, even now, I still do 1031 tax-free exchanges. The next building I developed after the Barclay was a building called the Lanesboro. And I'll tell you a quick story about the Lanesboro. Lanesboro, I bought at a sheriff's sale, a guy named Dwyer from Atlantic City. Anybody remember that name, James Dwyer? He lost the Lanesboro, which is 16th and Locust, the limestone building. at the corner of 16th and Locust. He lost it to the bank, foreclosed. I went out to West Philadelphia to the sheriff's sale, and I paid, I think, $4.7 million. Also borrowed all the money from the bank at that point against my leverage against my assets. But the funny story of the Lanesboro was it was a 19-story building. Peter Linneman at the time was at Wharton. Does anybody know Peter Linneman, the name Peter Linneman? Okay. Peter Linneman was head of the Wharton Real Estate Center. He came to me and said, my classroom, we want to do a project. I'm going to bring 40 kids to your Lanesboro building. Don't tell them what you're doing. We're going to break into groups of 10, four kids in each group, and they're going to have to do a presentation as to, in 8 weeks after we take them, and come to the presentation, they're going to tell you what they're going to do with the building. So I go to the presentation, I hear short-term housing, I hear office leasing, I hear hotel, everything, apartments. And at the end, they said to me, tell us what you're going to do. So I said, listen, I'm going to make single-floor condominium homes. It's really one of the first times, other than Washington Square, that was done. Single floor, 3,500 square feet each. Someone in the back of the room raises their hand and says to me, Mr. Domb. I said, what? What formula did you use? I said, I used the GUT formula. He said, gross urban, what is that? I said, it's called gut. I swear to God, I have no formula for doing that. I just did it just what I thought would work. And in time, you can appreciate this. Sometimes you have to have that in order to be really successful. But let me say this about, and then I'll cut off. Don't overextend yourselves. Don't overextend. Start out small and work your way up and be conservative because you don't want to get hurt. But I will say this. When you look at the Forbes 400 people, richest people, one is in the restaurant business, Subway. 50 to 60% are still in real estate. There's something to that. And you've seen the last few years how well Philadelphia has done in real estate. It's phenomenal, phenomenal. But I guess we can get into it, but where I'm at now with my real estate career is I'm managing my portfolio and I'm pruning off assets that don't produce the income that I think they deserve, and also selling assets that produce income but require too much of my time to manage, because I'm at a point now where time is almost more important than anything else to me. So that's where I am today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think with the time we lost for where we're at, let's go into Q&A. If you guys have thought about some good questions over the past 15, 20 minutes, what I want you to do is raise your hand. You'll shout it out. I'll repeat it so that you can hear it for the video. For either one of these two, we've got a couple good questions. Let's start with you, Jabbar.
What areas are you looking at now that you see for opportunities, like, towards whatever area you love?
Who's that question for? Okay. The question was, what areas do you see, what areas are developing right now that you see opportunities in, either one of you?
Well, I would definitely say Strawberry Mansion is an area there's still opportunity, because obviously there's an infusion of cash that's going in there, and there's a lot of infrastructure. I don't know if anyone knows about the Discovery Center that's coming to 33rd, and I think that's going to be absolutely fantastic. I also think the Wayne Junction, Germantown area is going to be a great area. We have a project there now. We know that there's another developer, Ken Weinstein, that's doing a lot of investing. So I think that that's going to be a great location. We were actually really successful in the Ludlow area, which is right around 7th and Girard. We had built some condos and were able to sell those pretty quickly. And from the time that we purchased the lots, we just saw other lots and other things being constructed very quickly. So that's an area I think that's prime as well. So that's just kind of based on our experience, boots on the ground.
I would say, just for my travels, I like the area by Pennovation Works, that area down there by University of Penn. I like Mantua. I do like Strawberry Mansion. I'm not buying there yet. I like Port Richmond. I like those there. I like East Kensington still. There's still plenty of opportunity there. There's still areas of South Philadelphia that are good. I mean, really, as long as we continue the growth of the two major populations of millennials for the outlying areas, and in the core areas, it's mostly baby boomers, the city will do well in all neighborhoods.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to throw this in here. I think West Philly has a bright future ahead of it. That's all I want to say. Yeah. Oh, I don't need to talk about my project. 62nd and Osage. We're doing a lot of houses. If you like Cobbs Creek, talk to me later. Who had somebody had a question back here. Yes, Brittany.
I just wanted to ask, why did you decide to go modular versus traditional way? Was it more cost effective? Because I know modular is more popular. I'm just curious about why.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, actually.
So the question was, why did you decide to go modular versus stick building? And so what are some of the benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. For ourselves, for our first project, we wanted to go modular because honestly, we were looking for effective ways to keep costs down. We put our 401ks in, but we didn't have a lot of capital. So we came out thinking very, very lean. And that was one of the ways to be able to do that. And as we've continued to develop, we just see that it is a great way to keep costs down because union in this city it is unreal. I mean, it can put a 30 to 40% premium on your projects. And by building in Middle Pennsylvania, it's a way to keep that cost down. We reduce the amount of on-site construction that has to occur, which actually keeps the project feasible. Give you one quick example. Even at the project, the student housing project, we literally shipped all of the furniture out to the modular company and had the furniture shipped and lifted by the crane. So we didn't have to pay for carpenters to just union carpenters to walk furniture up and break down boxes and bring them up and down the steps. I mean, that would have possibly made the project not even feasible. So for us, it's being creative, thinking out the box, being innovative so that the projects worked for us financially.
That's really interesting to hear that you ship furniture out to have it shipped back. Just a quick shout out here. Does anyone over here finance modular projects? Possibly? All right, Jared, raise your hand. Jared with Direct Mortgage Loan Company. I just want to give a quick shout out here. He's financed a lot of projects for us. I think you guys should talk to him and the rest of the sponsors afterwards. Did somebody else have a question in the back left? Let's go back here and then I'll come up to you. Yes, Angela, right? Yeah. So the question was that different corporations like PIDC were mentioned. Are there companies out there who will help you analyze your? Got it. Analyze what kind of funds are going to be available to your project, and I guess what that looks like.
Well, we actually do that now. We do development consulting. So that is one of the things that we will offer. It very much like Allan said, our development consulting is what we kind of live on, and we continue to reinvest our money, the monies that we make on our projects, into our next. So that is something that we can offer. So, definitely look me up, get my card, and I can talk to you more about it.
Testing. Cool. All right, you can keep that. All right, we're going to since we want to give you guys time to network and connect and ask these speakers questions, all the speakers afterwards. Yes.
I'm going to just make a comment from a political standpoint. I'm also a city councilman at large. And so I just want to let you know that yesterday, passed out of committee, Leslie knows all about this, and so does Tom, is the 1% construction tax. Now, it's got to go to the full council, but I believe there's the votes to pass that bill, a 1% construction tax. And I'll just explain to you my alternative. I'm, first of all, totally in favor of the $15 million it will generate for the Housing Trust Fund. We need to do that. I'm 100% on board. This is what I proposed yesterday. Those of you who want to support it, great. And we're really taxing the abatement, okay? We're taxing a 10-year abatement. And the math works out simply that it becomes a 9.4-year abatement. So here we have a free, no taxes, but we're going to tax that. We're taxing an abatement. It's insane. 9.4-year abatement. My proposal was simply this. Take the 10-year tax abatement, adjust it as follows. First 7 years, 100%. Year 8, 75, year 9, 50, year 10, 25. It becomes an 8.5-year abatement, which is 2.5 times the monies we can have, not just for the Housing Trust Fund, but monies for the school system, and let the administration advance the $15 million for the Housing Trust Fund to do all those programs, but don't put you put another tax in, now we have to add more people in revenue, they gotta monitor the tax, they gotta collect the tax on an abatement. We're better off adjusting the abatement. And I will say this, in 5 years, if it doesn't affect the construction world and the development world, we have to revisit it again and bring it down to 7 years maybe, and gradually, over a 10, 20-year term, wean ourselves off it, but not overnight. And the reason why I say it's important is because we can't have a construction tax without a conversation about the abatement. Because if you do, I guarantee you, they'll be back in a week about the abatement. And it's going to shut down construction. I'm worried about that. Because when you look out 2 years from now, there's not a lot in that pipeline. So my proposal is simply this. No construction tax. Do the programs. Let the city fund it. We have the money. Adjust the abatement to 8.5 years. It produces 2.5 times the revenue. It becomes an 8.5-year abatement versus 9.4. I just wanted to put that out there. Those of you who like the idea, I hope you support it. Those of you who don't like the idea, don't say anything. I think BIA may think...
Let me repeat that question just so the recording can hear. You said, why was the BIA important?
Why is the BIA supporting the 1% construction tax?
Got it.
I'm not sure. My only guess is that maybe they think that by supporting the tax, the 10-year abatement won't be touched. I don't believe that's the conversations that I've heard in council. And I just think you can't have a conversation on the construction tax without addressing the abatement. You should address both, and we should do it in a smart way. It's better off adjusting the abatement than creating another tax that we got to monitor and pay people to collect. Anyway, thank you. So I'm going to put that out there.
Thank you. And for all of those of you who want to learn a little bit about the abatement, you're going to be the last question, so I'm so happy you raised your hand. There's a study that was just done. It's very interesting. You should look on the city website. I actually read it last week. Really interesting. It talks about some of the things they're proposing, adjusting the abatement, the proposal that he just said, cutting it off at the end. You really should read about that. You are going to be the last question. No pressure. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I think your question is, the increase in transfer tax is going to hurt people who have to buy. And I 100% agree with you. I voted against it even today. Again, I voted against it. I'm against increasing a transfer tax at a time when there's a lot of young buyers in the market and older buyers who don't have the cash to make the down payment, and the transfer tax just adds to that burden. It's the wrong way to go. It's wrong, okay? I will say this. I'm in favor of reducing the transfer tax. I think you'd have more potential buyers than less, okay? And I think it's a mistake. But I haven't convinced my colleagues of that, okay? I need everybody out here to be talking about that, because increasing the transfer tax, it burdens you when you go to close. It's just crazy. We have one of the highest transfer taxes in the world. So Pittsburgh's a little higher, but everyone else is much lower than us. And all it's going to do is, in theory, it could change the value of the property, and in theory, it could lower the real estate taxes. If we really thought long-term, we'd eliminate it so the value of the properties go up, because as stakeholders, we want to see better values because we get the real estate taxes. But we don't think that in that light.
Awesome. That helped. All right, guys, we're going to leave you guys some time to network. Put your hands together for not just these two, but all of our panelists tonight. Whew.